Welcome to the new video of NeuroPhilos. Get ready to dive into a gripping tale that will leave you breathless, thinking, and inspired. Whether you're here for the mystery, the drama, or the unexpected twists, you're in the right place. Make sure to hit that like button, drop a comment, and subscribe so you never miss another powerful story. Let's begin. The Night and the Question of Life. In 1957, Swedish filmmaker Ingmar Bergman created one of the most haunting metaphors ever captured on film. On a gray, windswept shore, a medieval knight freshly returned from the Crusades sits at a rough wooden table, playing chess with death. The sea churns in the background, gulls circle overhead, and thunder clouds gather like omens. This image, simple, stark, eternal, became one of the defining portraits of the human condition. The knight is not merely playing to survive. He is playing for answers. He wants to know if God exists, if suffering holds meaning, if death truly ends all things. He believes that if he can delay checkmate just a little longer, he might uncover the secret pattern behind existence, a logic that will make sense of pain, faith, and fear. It is a beautiful and tragic illusion, one that mirrors our own daily struggle with meaning. In truth, we all sit across that same board. We negotiate with death, with fate, with uncertainty, moving the pieces of our lives as if one more clever strategy might solve the puzzle. We search for formulas to quiet our anxiety, self-help manuals, spiritual systems, productivity habits, psychological frameworks, each promising control, promising peace. We try to transform life into an equation, forgetting that equations belong to logic, not to being. The Danish philosopher Søren Kierkegaard saw this clearly in the 19th century. For him, existence was not a riddle to be solved but a mystery to be experienced. Life, he wrote, is not a problem to be solved, but a reality to be lived. The more we try to grasp it intellectually, the more it slips through our fingers like sand. Reason, though powerful, cannot capture the totality of being, it freezes what must remain fluid. Kierkegaard believed that humanity lives suspended between two irreconcilable poles, finitude and infinitude. We are finite creatures, trapped in bodies, bound by time, destined to die. Yet within us burns the desire for the infinite, to know, to create, to transcend. That tension, between the smallness of our flesh and the vastness of our longing, is what generates our anguish. To escape it, we invent systems. Some flee into pleasures, seeking to drown silence in stimulation. Others cling to moral structures and duties, believing that order can suppress the chaos. And others still take refuge in religion, hoping for an absolute truth that will hush the unknown forever. But every system, Kierkegaard warned, becomes another move in the same futile game. Like Bergman's knight, we keep playing, convinced that if we think hard enough, act righteously enough, or pray intensely enough, we will earn certainty. Yet the game has no final checkmate. The mystery is not meant to be defeated. It is meant to be lived through. This is the tragedy of the modern mind. We are obsessed with understanding, not because we love truth, but because we fear the void. We dissect life endlessly, trying to control what was never ours to command. We mistake analysis for experience. And in doing so, we lose the very thing we were searching for, the immediacy of being alive. Imagine the knight again. He stares at the board, his eyes shadowed, the sea roaring beside him. Each move he makes is brilliant, desperate, precise. But in his fixation, he no longer feels the wind on his face or the warmth of the woman who loves him. He has turned his existence into an intellectual duel with the inevitable. Kierkegaard would have whispered to him, "Abandon the board." The goal is not to outsmart death, but to recognize that the game itself is an illusion, a mirror of our restless need for meaning. Life begins only when we stop negotiating with it, when we stop demanding explanations and start participating in its chaos. To live, in Kierkegaard's sense, is to embrace uncertainty, to walk with paradox instead of solving it. It means admitting that pain, joy, faith, and doubt coexist, that the sacred hides within the ordinary, and that meaning is not discovered through logic but through presence. The night on the beach is all of us, terrified, intelligent, yearning for certainty. But perhaps the truest wisdom lies not in another clever move, not in another question answered, but in looking up from the board, to see the sea, to hear the wind, and to realize that the game was never about victory. It was always about awakening. The tragedy of the intellect. Since the dawn of philosophy, humanity has worshipped the intellect as its highest power, the sacred flame that separates us from beasts. From the marble halls of ancient Greece to the bright salons of the Enlightenment, thinkers proclaimed that reason could illuminate all mysteries, conquer superstition, and grant mankind dominion over nature. To think, to analyze, to name, this was to rule. Yet Søren Kierkegaard, writing in the 19th century, saw that the same intellect that promised liberation could also become a prison so subtle that we might never notice its bars. He called it the tragedy of the intellect, the moment when the human mind, seeking understanding, severs itself from life. Thought, in Kierkegaard's eyes, is a double-edged blade. It can open a path toward clarity, but it can just as easily cut away everything warm, spontaneous, and alive. The more we dissect existence to find meaning, the more we drain it of mystery, and without mystery, no meaning can survive. The philosopher described a type of person he called the spectator of life. This is the one who observes the world from a safe distance, analyzing endlessly, planning every move, judging every emotion before allowing it to be felt. They know everything about love except how to fall in it, everything about courage except how to act upon it. They are haunted by understanding, paralyzed by it. Their knowledge, once a tool of freedom, becomes a wall of mirrors reflecting only themselves. Bergman's Night on the Desolate Beach is the perfect image of this condition. Every move he makes on the chessboard is a question to the universe: why am I here? What comes after? What is the purpose of pain? But while he debates metaphysics with death, he forgets to live the hours that remain. He cannot taste the salt of the sea or see the beauty of the sun struggling through the clouds. In his desire to comprehend life, he stands apart from it. Kierkegaard understood this as a quiet catastrophe. The greatest danger, he wrote, is losing oneself, and this can happen very quietly, as if it were nothing. The intellect, when enthroned as king, isolates the soul. We replace lived experience with abstraction, passion with precision. We talk about love as if it were an equation, about virtue as if it were geometry. The mind spins endless theories while the heart atrophies from disuse. Why do we do it? Out of fear. Behind our obsession with explanation lies the terror of the unknown. To feel life directly is to feel its fragility, the certainty of death, the chaos of chance, the vast indifference of the cosmos. So we construct systems to tame it, philosophies, sciences, theologies, self-help doctrines. We name everything so that nothing can hurt us. But the truth remains: the more we claim to understand, the further we drift from the pulse of being. Kierkegaard warned that even the most brilliant mind cannot think its way to peace. Peace is not found in the intellect's conclusions but in its surrender. Reason, he said, should serve life, not command it. When thought becomes an idol, we begin to worship our own reflections, mistaking analysis for existence. We talk about what it means to live but forget to breathe. He did not reject thinking, far from it. His books are among the most intricate ever written. But he saw that thinking without passion leads to despair, while passion without thought leads to chaos. The task is not to abolish reason, but to place it back in its rightful position, as the servant of life, not its master. The intellect should illuminate the road, not dictate where we walk. Bergman's knight believed that if he could outplay death, he would gain truth. Yet every move only tightened the circle. What if, Kierkegaard asks, wisdom lies not in winning but in walking away from the board? What if understanding is not the goal at all, but participation, immediacy, presence? Perhaps that is the lesson hidden in the knight's silent stare across the waves. The tragedy is not that we think too little, but that we think so much we forget to live. Somewhere between the calculation of the mind and the beating of the heart, life itself waits, not to be solved, but to be felt. The three stages of existence. Søren Kierkegaard was not content merely to diagnose the tragedy of the intellect, he sought to map the paths human beings take in their desperate attempt to escape it. To him, existence unfolded in three stages or spheres of life, each representing a way we try to make peace with the absurd. These are the aesthetic, the ethical, and the religious stages, not rigid categories, but living conditions of the soul. In them, one can see humanity's struggle to reconcile freedom with meaning, passion with stability, and the infinite with the finite. The first is the aesthetic stage, the realm of pleasure and immediacy. Here, life is pursued as an endless collection of sensations, beauty, laughter, romance, art, intoxication, and adventure. The aesthetic person fears boredom above all things. To them, life must be a constant stream of novelty. The next journey, the next affair, the next brilliant idea, these become the chess moves with which they try to outwit emptiness. But Kierkegaard saw the shadow under the glitter. The aesthete's pleasures fade quickly, like wine turned to vinegar after the first sip. The constant chase for stimulation breeds exhaustion, not satisfaction. Boredom, Kierkegaard wrote, is the root of all evil. The one who lives only for delight ends up crushed beneath the weight of repetition. Don Juan, eternally seducing but never fulfilled, is the perfect symbol of this stage, a soul running endlessly from the silence within. The tragedy of the aesthetic life is that it hides despair beneath music and laughter. It promises freedom but delivers emptiness. When pleasure collapses, many turn toward a second path, the ethical stage. Here the individual seeks to replace chaos with structure. Marriage, career, and moral order become the pillars of stability. The ethical person strives to be consistent, dutiful, and respected. They measure their worth through responsibility, through being a good parent, a loyal friend, a trustworthy citizen. If the aesthete's cry is, "I want to feel," the ethical person's vow is, "I must do what is right." At first, this life seems superior, and in many ways, it is. Ethical existence brings coherence where the aesthetic brought fragmentation. Yet Kierkegaard, ever the surgeon of the soul, saw that even ethics can become a fortress against freedom. When rules, traditions, or moral certainty become too rigid, they stifle the trembling vitality of existence. Duty can turn into armor, protecting one from the terror of choice. A person may appear righteous, yet live secretly afraid of change, enslaved not by pleasure, but by principle. The ethical life offers dignity, but it cannot quiet the deeper question, why? Why be good? Why obey? Why must one's life conform to codes when the heart still aches for something beyond explanation? And when that question breaks through, as it inevitably does, the ethical person stands at a crossroads. Either cling to security or make the most frightening leap of all, the leap into faith. Thus begins the religious stage, the rarest and most paradoxical of the three. In it, the individual confronts the limits of both pleasure and reason, of both chaos and order. They recognize that logic cannot contain existence, that faith is not the opposite of doubt but its companion. The religious stage is the acceptance that life's meaning lies not in control but in surrender, not in certainty, but in trust. Kierkegaard illustrates this stage through the story of Abraham, commanded by God to sacrifice his son Isaac. Morally, the act is unthinkable; ethically, it is monstrous. Yet Abraham obeys, not because he despises ethics, but because he hears a voice beyond them. He suspends the ethical for something higher, what Kierkegaard calls the teleological suspension of the ethical. In that terrible, silent moment on Mount Moriah, Abraham becomes the knight of faith, trembling, anguished, yet obedient to an absolute that no reason can justify. For Kierkegaard, the religious life is not a retreat from anguish but a courageous embrace of it. It is to live in paradox, to doubt and still believe, to fear and still act, to love what might be taken away. The knight of faith stands alone, misunderstood by the world, yet alive in a way no aesthete or moralist can comprehend. The three stages are not steps on a ladder but mirrors reflecting where we stand with ourselves. Most of us live balancing fragments of all three, a taste for pleasure, a longing for order, and a flicker of transcendence. Yet Kierkegaard whispers that the fullest life begins only when we dare to walk into the unknown, when we stop asking for proof and begin to live as if meaning is possible even when unseen. The Vertigo of Freedom. For Kierkegaard, the beating heart of human existence is not pleasure or morality, it is freedom, and the haunting awareness of it. This awareness does not come as joy, but as anxiety, a trembling that he called angst, the vertigo of standing on the edge of possibility. It is the dizziness one feels when looking down from a cliff, realizing they could leap, not because they must, but because nothing prevents them. That abyss of potential, that unbearable openness, is the essence of human freedom, and also its torment. We are the only creatures who know that we can choose. The bird follows instinct, the river follows gravity. But the human being stands between heaven and earth, aware that every path is open, yet none are guaranteed. That realization is both divine and devastating. Kierkegaard wrote, "Anxiety is the dizziness of freedom." It is not fear of something outside us, not fear of a monster, a loss, or a punishment, but fear of ourselves, of the boundless responsibility that comes with choice. He illustrated this through the image of a child standing at the edge of a tower. The child feels a strange pull, not the desire to die, but the awareness that they could jump. That whisper of possibility terrifies them. It is the first taste of freedom, and with it comes anxiety. For to be free is to stand suspended between what we are and what we could become, between creation and destruction. Kierkegaard believed that most of us spend our lives fleeing from this anxiety. We try to bury it beneath systems that promise safety, religion, philosophy, relationships, work, entertainment, even reason itself. We create schedules, identities, and moral codes to avoid confronting the dizzying truth that nothing holds us in place except our own choices. We long for certainty because freedom feels too heavy to bear. But Kierkegaard warned that these systems, however comforting, are forms of existential procrastination. They offer the illusion of stability while quietly robbing us of authenticity. We begin to live according to borrowed truths, second-hand values, and cultural scripts. We follow the rules of the herd, thinking obedience will bring peace. Yet beneath that peace, the original anxiety still hums, muted, but alive, reminding us that we have traded our freedom for comfort. In this sense, anxiety is not a flaw to be cured, but a teacher to be heeded. It reveals our capacity for transformation. To feel anxious before a choice is to recognize that we are free, that the future is unwritten, and we are its authors. The aesthete avoids this by drowning in pleasure, the ethical man hides from it behind duty. But the person who dares to face anxiety directly, without escape, begins the journey toward the religious stage, toward the courage to live without guarantees. Modern life, Kierkegaard would say, has only intensified the vertigo. Our technology multiplies our choices, but not our wisdom. Social media, career paths, self-improvement doctrines, all whisper that we can be anything, while quietly reminding us that we are never enough. We are haunted by infinite possibilities and paralyzed by the fear of choosing wrongly. Anxiety becomes chronic, humming beneath the noise of constant activity. Yet Kierkegaard insists that within this anxiety lies the seed of authentic faith. When we stop running from it, we begin to awaken. We see that life's uncertainty is not a curse but an invitation, to act, to risk, to live passionately without guarantees. Freedom's vertigo is the doorway to spiritual growth. Only by enduring it can we transcend the superficial comforts that keep us asleep. To live authentically, then, is to accept anxiety as the price of being human. It is to feel the trembling of existence and still step forward. Every great act, love, art, courage, faith, is born from that trembling. The knight of faith, Kierkegaard's highest ideal, is not free from anxiety, he walks hand in hand with it. He leaps not because he knows what awaits him, but because he refuses to remain paralyzed on the edge. Freedom will always be dizzying. But the task is not to escape the vertigo, it is to dance within it. The moment we stop demanding certainty, we begin to live with depth. Anxiety ceases to be our enemy and becomes our compass, pointing toward the infinite. For in the trembling of our freedom, we find the pulse of what it means to be alive. The leap of faith. At the edge of understanding lies a chasm, dark, silent, unknowable. All reasoning collapses there. All systems, doctrines, and formulas fall apart like scaffolding stripped of its foundation. For Søren Kierkegaard, this is where the most decisive moment of human existence begins. It is the moment of the leap of faith, the act of courage that transforms anxiety into freedom, thought into action, and existence into life. The leap of faith is often misunderstood. Many think it means blind belief, closing one's eyes to reason, surrendering to dogma. But Kierkegaard's leap is not about abandoning thought, it is about acknowledging its limits. It is not ignorance, it is transcendence. It begins when the intellect has done all it can, when logic reaches the cliff's edge and cannot go further, and yet, something within us whispers, jump. He saw this in the biblical story of Abraham, the father of faith. When God commands Abraham to sacrifice his beloved son Isaac, no argument or moral rule can justify the act. Ethically, it is monstrous, rationally, it is absurd. Yet Abraham obeys, trembling. He walks up the mountain with knife and wood, carrying both his faith and his anguish. In that unbearable moment, Kierkegaard says, Abraham performs the teleological suspension of the ethical. He suspends all human logic in obedience to a divine call beyond understanding. For most people, such faith is terrifying. To act without guarantees, to trust without proof, feels like madness. And yet, Kierkegaard insists, this is the only authentic way to live. The leap of faith is not a denial of doubt, it is an embrace of it. Faith does not begin where certainty resides, it begins where certainty ends. He wrote, faith begins precisely where thinking leaves off. The individual must leap, not because they have solved the mystery, but because they have accepted that the mystery cannot be solved. They must live as if meaning exists, even when it cannot be demonstrated. The leap is an act of passion, not logic, a decision to live despite the absurd. Kierkegaard compared faith to standing on the edge of a burning building. Behind you, the flames roar, before you, the void stretches wide. To remain where you are is death. To jump is risk. You cannot see if someone will catch you, yet you leap, because to live at all, you must. The leap does not guarantee safety, it guarantees only that you are alive. This is why faith, for Kierkegaard, is the highest form of courage. It demands the full presence of doubt. Without uncertainty, there is no faith, only knowledge. True faith does not eliminate fear, it walks alongside it. It is not the victory over trembling, but the choice to move through it. The knight of faith, Kierkegaard's archetype, is not a priest or a mystic withdrawn from the world. He is an ordinary person who lives passionately amid uncertainty. He goes to work, loves, suffers, and hopes like everyone else, but with an inward freedom that defies logic. He acts without the need for guarantees. He trusts life, not because he understands it, but because he participates in it. To take the leap of faith is to renounce control, to stop demanding that life make sense before we live it. It is to embrace paradox as the structure of existence itself, joy and sorrow, reason and madness, freedom and fate, life and death, all intertwined. It is to stop standing at the chessboard, strategizing against death, and finally step away to feel the wind, the sea, and the warmth of being. Faith, in this sense, is not confined to religion. It is a posture of existence. Every act of creation, love, or commitment is a small leap of faith. The artist paints without knowing if anyone will see. The lover opens their heart without knowing if it will be returned. The dreamer begins a journey without knowing the destination. These are all moments when life asks us to jump, to trust that something awaits, even when invisible. In the end, Kierkegaard's leap of faith is not a doctrine but a rebellion against paralysis, against despair, against the illusion that understanding must precede living. It is the final refusal to remain a spectator of one's own existence. The leap is the birth of the self, the moment the individual chooses to live passionately in the face of the absurd. And when we leap, trembling but alive, we discover something profound. The ground does not appear beneath our feet, it rises to meet us. For in daring to live without guarantees, we find the only truth that matters, that life itself, unpredictable and mysterious, was always worthy of faith.